This is Imperialism number 8. We got this one and 2 more to go. We're going to look at some politics and then get into the Panama Canal a little bit. I know we've talked a little bit about that before, so it's going to just be kind of a review. So in 1900, McKinley gets reelected. He is an imperialist, so he's trying to take over other countries. Remember, he is the one that annexed Hawaii. But right before he gets reelected, an anti-imperialist league is formed. And basically, if you look at this political cartoon, it's basically saying the eagle, which is a representation of the United States, is trying to spread its wings across the globe. So this anti-imperialist league came as a result of imperialism, and they don't like imperialism. You got Grover Cleveland, Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, and Jane Addams, some of the people that we've talked about before that you should know about. This is Twain. He says, "It should, it seems to me, be our pleasure and duty to make those people free and let them deal with their own domestic questions in their own way. And so I am an anti-imperialist. I am opposed to having the eagle put its talons on any other land." So basically, you have people that are saying, the United States needs to stay out of the affairs and work on what's going on in our own country. For example, with this political cartoon, you have Lady Liberty here. It's on her sword there. It's the sword of justice. And this is President McKinley. He is too worried about attacking and going to the Philippines. He doesn't see what's going on in his own backyard. And this is the lynchings of African Americans that's happening in the United States. And it says civilization begins at home. So we're too worried about what's going on in other countries, not worried about what's going on here. That still goes on today, that argument. So this is where we're at with our acquisitions, what we've acquired so far. Alaska and Hawaii, they're states now in the United States. So again, this is talking about currently today, where are these areas that we acquired. Cuba, independent country. Philippines is independent. Puerto Rico is a commonwealth or a territory of the United States. Guam, still a territory of the United States. They have their own governor. They have their own legislatures. Those are lawmaking bodies. And they are represented in the U.S. House of Representatives. All right. This next part that we're going to get into is going to be, it's going to focus on what kind of happens after this imperialist state and getting into the start of World War I. All right. So the first thing that happens is McKinley's going to get assassinated, and then Roosevelt's going to take over for him. So he gets assassinated by an anarchist. This Leo guy, he believes that we shouldn't have government. He's against the government. And he thought that McKinley was the symbol of oppression for what happened to him losing his job in 1893. So Congress then passes legislation to put Secret Service in charge of protecting the president. So we've had, I think, 4 presidents, starting with Lincoln in the last half of the 1800s. At least 3, I'm thinking 4 presidents, but at least 3 presidents were assassinated in that last half there. I think it was 3 or 4. So we've talked about this before. This was one of the first things we talked about this year. Under the Russian Revolution was the Russo-Japanese War. This was between Russia and Japan. And again, they were competing for control of Korea. So these are 2 imperialist nations fighting over Korea. If you remember me talking, we'll talk about this later on. This is the day. Japan defeats Russia, then runs out of men and money. They secretly call out Roosevelt to make a peace plan. You guys should remember this political cartoon. You should know who this guy is. This is Tsar Nicholas II, and this is the Emperor of Japan. It says, "Let us have peace here," and this is an olive branch, which is a symbol of peace. Japan got half the Falkland Islands. Russia doesn't have to pay money. Japan gets Manchuria and Korea. Next, what's going on, and again, this is all a result of imperialism. You have something called the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty. We've talked about this before. This gives the United States kind of a share to the rights to build a canal in Central America. Remember, we originally thought we were going to go through Nicaragua, but that wasn't going to work, and then we ended up going into Panama. It was much shorter, but the work was a little bit more difficult. If you remember, there was a French company in the 1880s that tried to build a canal. They gave up on it. We remember what happens to French people when they go into the Caribbean. They end up dying of diseases. So Congress passed Congress decides Panama, we purchase the claim, so that gets passed. And then basically what happens is we have the John Hay. This is the same guy that wrote the Open Door Notes. We pass this treaty, and it gives us sole rights to build a canal in Central America. And if you guys look here, right here is Bogota, and that is the capital of Colombia. And if you recall, what we've talked about is Panama used to be controlled by Colombia, except when the United States went in to build the canal, we started a revolution and gave Panama its independence, and within 2 weeks had a deal to build the canal. So yeah, we've talked about that before. Problem was Panama was controlled by Colombia, so yeah, we started the Panamanian Revolution against Colombia, and within 2 weeks we had the canal zone. And we've talked about the fact that we pay them money up front for it, and then we pay them rent after that. The canal zone is the canal and then a certain amount of distance on each side of the canal. And this is the Nicaraguan route that we were going to take. It's a lot longer. There is this large lake here, but it was still a lot more work, and it was a lot more expensive than the Panama Canal. Costa Rica is here. Nicaragua is right on top of Costa Rica, for those of you that don't know that. Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, so right here. Construction of the canal. Builders fought diseases like yellow fever, malaria. The volcanic soil was difficult to remove, so doing the work was tough. We had a lot of different workers from a lot of different countries and ethnicities. We had many that died from accidents. It cost $380 million, and it took about 10 years to complete. That year is important because it was the year before the World War I started. All right, if you watch this, it's a time lapse for it. It's a pretty cool video. Kind of takes you through the lock system and stuff. If you guys see here, you can see the locks going up and down, and basically that just allows the boats to travel from one elevation to another. So there's no way to, it's basically just steps that are created. So you guys can watch through that. It's pretty interesting. All right. So we have these areas. I'm going to continue here a little bit on this one. We gained control of these areas: American Samoa, Guam. We looked at a map a little bit ago. Those are the areas that we have control in. So now what we're going to get into, and we're going to get into this in the next video, is our interest. We now have an interest in Latin America. What are we going to do to protect it? And that's what we're going to look at in Imperialism number 9. This was Imperialism 8.